So, Julie, thank you very much for joining us. Um, you've got 40 years of experience in social care. I very much doubt there is anything that you've not seen. I want to start by asking you, what's the one thing that you wish people knew about care homes before they came into your care home?
Crikey, that's a really big question. But I would say the one really big thing that I would love people to understand is that coming into a care home is not the end of your journey. It is just a different phase in your journey. It is a place where you can develop, where you can live, and where you can thrive. It is not the end of all things by coming into a care home.
It's a really poignant message. Who do you think struggles with that more? Do you think it's the individuals who are receiving care, or their families, or who?
I think it's families and I believe it's individuals as well. I think it's families because the understanding of what a care home service looks like is completely different to the reality, and that most people don't step inside a care home until they're at that crux of an emergency when it has to happen. I think for the individual, again, it's a lack of understanding. It's a situation where they've been in hospital and all of a sudden they find themselves in a position whereby they're not going to be able to go home, and it's almost used as a threat that they're going into care. And I think it's those words, they're going into care, that create that fear and that misnomer that this is the end of all things, that they're going to be lost, that there will be no value to their life, and that they have no say over anything that happens to them.
It was really interesting. You said earlier that they won't be able to go home, and yet we talk about them going into a care home, which my business's case, we talk about our care homes being a forever home. We recognise that we have the responsibility that this could very much be your last home. Um, I was wondering how you find that emotion playing out when you're dealing with new placements into your home.
It's a really strong emotion, and I think that often we're faced with situations where we will receive a referral that comes through that doesn't represent the individual at all. It's very clinically based. It doesn't tell us who the person is. So it's very difficult to actually make any adjustments over what the individual would like in their room or how they would like that experience to be. And it's not until that person is actually present, and that tends to be at their height of emotions, that you can actually sit down with them and say, look, just take a breath. We're not here to dictate to you anything. This could be your forever home. This could be an interim, but this is a partnership. It's between you and us. If you like us, you can stay as long as you want to. But if you feel that we're not right for you, we will support you to make the right decision from this point forward.
Hmm. So it's really interesting. You're talking about very much fundamentally talking about choice, and yet many people who come into care instead feel like they don't have a choice.
And I think that's true. And I think that the more we deal with the hospitals and the local authorities, the more we realise that choice is not something that generally people have. And this could be related to a transition in fees from when somebody moves from a discharge to assess to being permanently funded. And all of a sudden, the local authority will say, we will not pay for this placement. And this individual that we have been caring for suddenly finds themselves in a situation of, what happens now? And there's a lack of communication from the local authorities in some instances in actually supporting that individual. And I had a case only recently where we had to sit down with somebody when we were informed the individual was going to be moved 2 days before they moved to another care facility. And I think that, you know, if that happened to you as an individual in your own home, if somebody came and knocked on your door at home and said, pack your bags, you're leaving in 2 days' time, the emotional disturbance that you go through is horrific. And I think that the individual is often not given the opportunity or the support to actually say, actually, hold on, I want to be here.
Yeah. And you and I both know how our care homes we want them to run, and we share values. I'm sure there are nuances. It feels alien to me that a care home can be there to support someone, and yet at the same time the individual might have to be asked to leave, and we might have to say, well, look, we can't do anything here. We're going to have to acquiesce to you leaving the care home, and that feels wrong. It feels against what I feel a care
It
home should
is.
be.
It's completely against everything that we stand for. It's against everything that has driven me for the last, well, nearly 40 years in pushing how the sector is seen and how we've developed the homes that we have. But we are subject to regulations and bodies that pay for care that people are receiving. And ultimately, we cannot just have a situation where we have somebody living with us and the fees are not being paid. Because how then do we look after everybody else that's in our care? And it's a very sad state of affairs, and the truth is that I don't see that it's going to get any better.
I think I'd love to get your view later on about where we're going in care and talk more about that. Um, let's just set the scene a little bit, if you don't mind. You've been in the sector for nearly 40 years. An incredibly valued voice in the community, and you know, I'll say it publicly, and since this is going out, thank you so much for the support you gave everyone during COVID. And you probably embarrassing to say that, but I do know you saved lives with some of the help you gave. But you've got experience that from the 1980s, where, just to remind people listening, this is when the Thatcher government decided to privatise social care, previously run by pretty much exclusively the local authorities. And you lived through that period and worked through that period. What was that like, that transition?
It was difficult, but it was also liberating as well, because I mean in the 80s the whole social care structure was very much about knitting and slippers, I would say. The level of care that an individual needed was far, far less than today. Everything was very much about smaller, more residential or domestic style care settings. And the inference was very much about what daily living was like, as opposed to where we are now. What happened was that a lot of providers struggled with that transition from having your small, frail elderly care home to what suddenly was becoming a far more complex environment, and where care homes were having to look at the levels of care that they were giving and they were being asked to give. Along with that, the new regulatory bodies, the government guidance, it was very enlightening, but you had to move very quickly to stay ahead of the game, to make sure that your care home didn't get swallowed, basically.
Swallowed by what, sorry?
By regulation, by people leaving in vast numbers, because suddenly they were experiencing a lot more focus on the care that they were delivering and the person-centred, as opposed to somebody saying, yes, Mrs. Smith had a great day today, she had shepherd's pie for lunch, and she slept well. I mean, I can remember copious records of slept well, slept well, slept well, slept well, as opposed to today. You write a narrative about the experience of the individual over the night period, and you have all the supporting technology to help you assess whether or not that individual's experience over that 12-hour period has been a good one to give outcomes for the day. And a lot of people couldn't cope with that.
I've been in the sector since my family bought its first care home in '97. I've been actively involved since 2016. You mentioned earlier that there was a transition from it being quite residential or domestic settings into something much more complex. Was that an overnight thing? Did that happen in the 80s, or was it more through the 90s and into the 2000s?
No, it was a transition. The biggest transition, I would say, was between the 80s and 90s. That's when the focus really shifted from just very general care for the individual without it being so personalised. Moving into the 90s, we were being asked to account more for the things that we were doing and to lengthen our reporting processes so that they reflected more about the individual. By the time we got to sort of like the 2000, 2004, 2005, there was a lot more emphasis on the pre-admission assessment and the process before the individual came to us. Because before that, there was very little interaction between you going out and visiting people. It was perfectly acceptable for you to receive a phone call to say, we have Mrs. X or Mr. Y, this is the basics, can you accept? So the majority of assessments were actually done over the phone, because you have to go back to, which is what a lot of people don't think about. I can remember getting my first computer in my office and everything was written. And I can remember the first time that we started to use the computer for assessments, and emails, maybe I had 1 or 2 a day, because people just didn't really use that kind of technology. So there's been a huge growth that people have had to come to terms with. So what came with that was this migration of an older group of individuals who were not willing to learn and to put these things, and so they left. And so we did have a big gap in our recruitment purely on the basis that people didn't like to change.
Do you think the sector's solved for that now? That we've backfilled those managers and those deputies, and we've got, or do you still feel that there's the sector's missing something because we lost that experience?
I think we haven't resolved recruitment. I do think that recruitment needs to be more specialist. I think that as providers, we need to be a lot more forward thinking about the people that we're employing. it's very difficult to get the right balance between a business manager and a care home manager. But fundamentally, they are businesses, and it's very difficult to get that mix. I think one of the really good things that's come out of the changes is that you no longer have to have a registered nurse to run a nursing facility. And for me, that's enabled a lot of people who've come into the sector and moved up through the care levels to actually take that opportunity, and they have the ground knowledge of moving through those levels. And you can develop the business side, but you can't necessarily develop those core values of care.
It's really interesting. So it sounds like, to borrow a phrase, everyone could work in a care home, but not everyone can care.
Exactly. Absolutely.
I, is that a is that was that always the case, or is that a more modern thing? Because it would be quite easy for me to be cynical and say, "Oh, that's Gen Z, and it's a modern problem."
Yeah, I think that's a more modern thing, but I do think that a lot of that blame, for want of a better word, falls on us as providers in not talking enough about what the roles involve and what we want from the individuals. If I look back at the types of people that used to work with me all those years ago, they were very, very homely based people. They weren't people that were medically sound, but they were people that had care at their heart, and it was very much about looking after the individual without having to document it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So it sounds like it feels like the values, and I use the word feel. I think when you walk into a good care home, you know it's not by anything other than what it feels like, and you can feel the values of care just emanating
Yeah,
from a good care home.
and I would 100% agree with you. The feeling that you get when you walk in, it doesn't actually matter whether it's a care home or any kind of business. It's that initial welcome, it's that initial feeling of making you feel at ease that helps you walk through the next set of doors. I mean, today we've had people that have come to Azalea Court today to look around, and for the first time ever, our staff team put on their first ever pantomime, which was made up of the people that live with us and staff, and the people that are coming to visit. It was chaos, but it was absolute fabulous chaos. I did have to explain at one point because one of the people that live with us was playing the part of Bob Cratchit, and this couple had come to look around the home, and they just walked in at the moment that this particular individual was on all fours, on the floor, completely just doing this off of his own back, with Ebenezer Scrooge standing over him saying all of these words, but explaining what was happening, and they were like, this is what we want. This feeling, this participation, this sharing of experiences is what we're looking for.
Care homes are a place where life continues.
Absolutely. And I think that's the key message more than anything else, is that the care setting, home, whatever words you want to use, fundamentally, it is a place where you can thrive. It isn't just about survival, it's about living, and it's about living your best life in a supported environment, which will either help you go back home, or it will help you become part of a community that genuinely cares about you as a person.
So it's really interesting that you're talking about the objectives of the individuals there and what the individual receiving care will be aiming for. Does your service ever talk about that with the family members and what their individual objectives are, not for their loved one, but actually for themselves?
Yes, I mean, for families, the majority of families that we talk to are in a really heightened state of stress. And they have been given a list of places to visit, some of which are not even close to where they live. And so by the time they come to talk to us, they can have visited 2 or 3 other care homes and be completely confused by the whole system. One of our objectives here is, irrespective of whether the person chooses to go forward with a placement or not, we try very hard to give them as much information as possible about all the people that they can talk to, about what their rights are, about what the individual's rights are, what to look for, some of the questions to ask. Because for us, it's very much about we are one sector, and we need to support each other to enable people to make the right choices about the care that they receive. And just because they might not choose to have the care with us, it's important that they make the right choices to have the care with someone else.
What sort of questions would you be asking them? If we have a perfectly educated individual who comes in and they listen to this podcast, what are the 3 questions that you really want them to ask when you first meet with them?
Why is it that they want to have this transition? 9 times out of 10, the response is, we've not been given a choice. We don't know what else to do. How it's going to happen, and that just because the hospital site or the other facility, whatever it is, says you have to move by tomorrow, you actually do have rights, and you can actually say, look, we understand that we're going to move from the hospital or from wherever, but let's do this together in the best interests of the person, so we can move on this particular date. And I suppose the third thing that I always say to them is just take a breath. This is one of the most important decisions that you will make. And nobody should be putting pressure on you to actually make that move. It should be a collaborative. And if you need us to help you with that and to speak up for you with that, then we will.
So, and then thinking about the admissions process, I guess, but also the people that are now living in our services. You mentioned earlier that there's obviously been a change in the acuity and the needs of individuals that we're now supporting. If you go from the 1980s and then sort of take me through the decades, what have been the changes? What were the sort of the types of individuals we were caring for in the 80s, 90s and onwards?
I would say very much in the 80s, it was very much about very much care of the elderly. We didn't really understand about dementia, so we would say that people were confused or muddled. There wasn't any real topics of conversation that would say it was one of the forms of dementia. So the transition on the dementia pathway alone has been meteoric. Understanding that to say somebody is muddled or confused is no longer acceptable. To say that somebody wanders, which is a phrase that we used to use all of the time. So we would have a referral that said, Mrs. Smith is 89 years of age, she's mildly confused and she wanders. And that would be very much a typical type of referral. Behaviours were not discussed, challenges were not discussed. And I think if you move through the years, what has happened is that the sector has gone from typically your 80-plus-year-old individual who is mildly confused and wanders to the extreme complexities that the care sector picks up now, which very much underpins the NHS. We have become a very, very complex society within our sector, and we are very much supporting what happens within the NHS with all of the transfers that are coming through.
So one thing that I remember from when parents first bought their first care home, I was obviously on the floor helping out doing shifts, and I don't remember the individuals that we were caring for. It was a dementia residential home. I don't remember them having the level of complexity that we now see. Given what you said, that sounds a similar history. Why is that, do you think? Is it that people who lived with dementia in the 80s and 90s were in a hospital, or were they somewhere else, or was it just his dementia changed? What's the difference?
I think that people's knowledge has changed. If I can very clearly remember working in a hospital ward which had a very mixed group of people with very challenging behaviour alongside some very, very young people as well. There were bars on the windows. The entrance to the ward was locked. You only went in if you were accompanied by another individual. There was limited furniture. The TV was behind a grid, and people were sitting, chanting, biting themselves, rocking, standing facing the walls. Now, if I had the ability to turn back time with the knowledge that I have now and to go back and to address how we used to look after people who were considered to be challenging because we didn't understand what was happening with them, we would have a situation whereby people with dementia, Alzheimer's, Lewy body were all in these kind of places. Malnutrition was quite high because there was no understanding of what the dietary needs were. So it's not just about understanding the individual's mental decline through dementia. We've also come on in leaps and bounds in respect of what we understand about the whole body and how it needs its nutrition and hydration to be able to function, which then supports the person who has got dementia, which then reduces the number of admissions to hospital, and it reduces your UTIs and your chest infections. So I would say, very sadly, all those years ago, it was something that just wasn't talked about, and I would say people were taken and placed into an environment because people didn't know how to behave and how to look after these people that had these really sad situations in the forms of dementia and Huntington's and Parkinson's, etc.
Okay, so the individuals were there in our community, in our society. They were just hidden in call it an
Yes.
institution, if you will. Okay. It sounds like yeah. When I was talking to Harris in a previous podcast, we were talking through sort of the evolution of social care and the use of institutions and workhouses in sort of the 1800s, 1930s. And that's it's really interesting how social care has now. We started in the 1940s with the NHS, and that's where health and health care is provided, and the residential care that we provide in social care is very much, I think that's a housing issue. But we're now talking about an environment where social care is this mixture of both the housing solution, but also very much a healthcare solution. When you talk about providing nutrition, I think then people think, well, surely you feed them. Well, yes, but we've got to think about not only the nutritional content and what they need and the amount of fluid they have to have, but also the texture, how do you puree it, how do we make it attractive to them, and also and everything else that we need in terms of their tolerances and where their medication's at and everything else. Um, what's it been like moving through the sector from a sort of a non-clinical sort of sector in the 1980s through to where we are now, which quite frankly, in residential care homes, the only difference between a residential care home and a nursing home, particularly in older person care, is that in a nursing home you pay the nurses, in the residential home the nurses come from outside. That seems to be the only difference. I was wondering what your view of that journey has been like.
Yeah, I think today it's very blended. Very blended. I think that I think you're right. There was a very clear divide between residential and nursing. I would often be asked, are you a residential care home or are you a nursing care home? And at the time, years ago, we would be saying, no, we're a nursing home because we have nurses. Whereas today, I think in a residential care setting, the level of complexities can and is just as high as those in a nursing home's situation. So for me, I mean, although we're a nursing home, we don't actually say that we're a nursing home anymore. We say that we're a care home that can provide nursing. We took the approach many years ago that you did not have to have a fully qualified nurse looking after a group of people who needed nursing care. It was more about the approach to the care that you had and the knowledge of the individuals. So I think that there is a misconception that residential care holds a lower position than nursing care traditionally. Whereas actually, if you look at the type of care that's being delivered, you can actually be providing a higher level of care in a residential setting than you are in a nursing setting due to the complexities of social care that you're providing.
Do you think that? Do you think I don't well? Sorry, I was going to ask. Do you think that people understand that? And by people, I mean people outside of care. I think the answer is no. What do you think we as a sector can do to actually help improve that understanding?
I think the most important thing that we can do as a sector is talk about the services that we provide. I think we should invite people into our services more, way before they get to that emergency situation whereby they're having to make decisions when they are mentally at their worst. I think that we are very poor at talking about all of the good things that we do within our sector. And I think that the only way that we as a sector are going to change the perception of who we are and what care we provide is by doing it ourselves. And that's doing it with our communities and doing it with the community at large, because nobody else is going to do that for us. And there's so much that goes on in our sector that is so positive, and we don't talk about it enough. All you hear is the negative things, and we should actually be putting our hands up and saying, we are a community and you're welcome to come to our community. You don't have to live here. Come, have coffee. Come and see us. Come and join in. We've got an event on Wednesday evening, and we have invited all of the people in our area just to come and actually see what it is like to be within a care setting. And it's not all doom and gloom. It's not end of the road. It's actually joyful, and it's about laughter and a living and sharing experiences.
I'm going to ask you to say some of the good things that you do. It's a long list, I know. So. But describe that. Describe what great looks like at Azalea Court.
Do you know what? I have the most amazing group of people that work with me. I am so fortunate that the team that we have here have taken what I have envisaged to be a vibrant community of people, and they have just gone with it full on. And what difference that makes is that they come in every day and they show up with a smile, and they're ready to just dig deep and give the best that they possibly can. But what's so important is that we give them what it is that they need. So we run a lot of wellbeing programs for our teams. And I think that, you know, so many of them are things that we can do that actually, they don't actually cost us physically, because there's lots of things that you can have, whether it's points for your breaks, that you can buy school uniforms for people that are really struggling. We do food boxes for our staff who are really struggling during the school holidays. We have a complete amnesty in respect of if you can't come into work, ring us and tell us you can't come into work. If it's a childcare issue, it's okay. You know, it's no one is going to hold that against you. And that working partnership between all of us means that there is a great deal of trust, and that then enables us to have faith in everything that we do, and it removes the fear of people like CQC coming in and thinking, what are the team really thinking? We know what they're thinking because they're telling us and we're acting on it. So for our people that live with us, our whole of December is packed full of activities. Every day we have a marquee that goes up in our garden on the 1st of December, and that happens every year. And what it does is it means that everybody can come together. No one is isolated. All of our units mix. And it just means that we have enough space for families, friends, community to come in. We have a bistro that we've developed. and we don't charge for anything in the bistro. So if you come in and you want to visit, you want to have a look around, or you just need 5 minutes so our ambulance crews that come, they go into the bistro, they'll have a panini, they have coffee, but all of that just builds the rapport of it's community living. We're there to support you, you're there to support us. I don't know, I could talk forever on it. So sorry.
But it's talking about this sense of community as as an approach to care, if you will, and this a philosophy of how you do care. And it's not the same for
No.
every provider. Some providers, because of the nature of their service, simply can't keep that open, or for any other reason. Um, do what's the general sort of sense of when people come in and see this? Is this do they buy into it? Does everyone accept it, or do some people go, no, I want something else?
I can honestly say we don't have situations where people come in and say they want something else other than if we have been recommended and we're just too far away from where the core family are. Other than that, no, people come, and we have people coming back after people have been discharged home, or if sadly they've ended their journey with us, we have relatives coming back here, and they have lunch. And it's because I lost both my parents within 2 weeks of each other during COVID, and for me, I have a place to go to where I can sit and I can reflect. I think often in our setting, what we are not so good at is when the placement ends, there is this almost like this cut-off that your responsibility with the individuals can end as well. And what we try to encourage is that actually you can come back here. You can come back, you can sit in the garden, you can join an activity, you can have a coffee. Because actually the last 5 years of the person living with us was so important, and it formulated those memories that actually you can just reflect and you can talk to people that you know and went through that experience with you. And I think that's something that we could improve on, that the care doesn't stop when the care stops, if that makes sense.
It does. I think when you've got a value of caring and you've obviously built a team that share that value, I, I don't think you can turn it off. I think you've got the
Mm.
right thing to care. Um, so you've got individuals coming in. Obviously, it's a really stressful moment. There's a ton of emotions flying around. Um, everything from grief. You know, your loved one is going into care. This is probably part of the end of the road. It might be the beginning of the end, but it's probably part of it. So the early onset of grief, you've got sadness that they've got to this point, and I've even seen people experiencing relief, and then the meta emotion of I feel angry that I'm feeling relief, and they start to beat themselves up for someone else is caring now, and you know it can be a really challenging time, that moment of placement and admission. What's your experience of that, and what are some of the positives and some of the negatives that you've experienced, and any sort of help and guidance you can give to anyone who's going through that process?
We definitely initially we were lacking in what we could provide people with that kind of support. And so we talked to people and asked them, what is it do you think that we did well, and what do you think we need to improve on? And one of the things that came across was that everyone was really busy, and we didn't have dedicated grief counsellors. So I did what every care provider does, is I had a look at it and thought, is this going to be something that's going to cost me so much that I'm just not going to be able to put this in, because I'll be distraught if that's the case. And we were able to tap into some grief counselling that was free. And we developed grief counsellors. So we talked to our teams first and foremost and said, would anyone be interested in doing this? Because obviously it has to be, someone has to buy into it. This isn't something that you can put on an individual. And we had 3 members of staff that chose to do the grief counselling. And what that meant was our contract with those individuals was that if they were contacted by a family member who wanted to talk to them about any part of the process that they were going through, we would allow them the time to do that. And it wouldn't be an afterthought, it would actually be part and parcel of that care that was being delivered. And that actually has been really, really positive, because when people come in, our grief counsellors introduce themselves and say, you know, somebody might not be ready at that moment, but they just introduce themselves as a friendly face. And we also created a family and friends liaison person who's also our quality assurance manager. And so every newsletter that we produce every month, all of her details are in there. And it gives people the opportunity to talk to somebody that doesn't have a boss hat on. Somebody that they can relate to, somebody that's not talking purely about care or purely about fees. It is literally about, this is how I feel today. Why do I feel like this? I'm so angry over this whole process. And why is it that my mum or dad, so bearing in mind the age range of individuals we look after has changed dramatically. Why is it that my mum or dad has to die? Why? I'm not ready for this. And that's one of the things that we've changed.
What are the main emotions that you see in care? What are they? It's interesting to hear people being angry, almost act their parents for being old. What other emotions are people going through?
Fear. Fear of financial fear. People that have been living in their parents' home, what's going to happen now? Am I going to lose where I'm going to live? Who do I talk to? I don't understand the financial complexities of this. So I would say fear, anger, isolation is another really big thing, because there is not a community of individuals out there within the care sector that people feel that they can tap into, because I don't think that it's well known that there are societies that you can talk to unless we tell people. So I would definitely say isolation, fear, anger and sadness. They're the 4 key things that people work through. And sometimes they're hitting all of them at the same time. And that comes out in, you didn't give mum a cup of tea, you didn't give dad his right shirt, you didn't get dad up at this time. But when you actually sit down and have those conversations, it's all of the backstory that is causing the problems, not what is happening at that moment on that day.
So, what do you think is the main driver of that? It's never going to be just one thing, is it? But what do you think that most people, I guess, misunderstand or don't understand about social care that's driving this anxiety?
They have no idea who we are. There is nothing out there that says what life is like within a care setting. There is no support for the person when they are transferring from hospital to us. Social workers, I hear it over and over again, social workers will just give, this is the list of care homes in your area. Go and do it. Go and find somewhere. The discharge teams, you'll get a referral that will come through, and then you try to contact the relatives and the numbers are wrong, or the email addresses are wrong. The information that you receive is 5 or 10 years old, and suddenly you're talking to a relative and you're saying you've had this referral come through, and they're going, I didn't even know. I didn't know that mum was ready for discharge. No one told me. So I think the key thing for people again in the community is understanding who we are, and us getting that message out there.
Okay. What do you think surprises most people about care homes? What part of the provision of a care home service would surprise most
That
people?
they are living and breathing places of joy. Fundamentally, the most, if you could lay a bet on what people are going to say, they will say, I had no idea that it was like this. What, they have their own room? Or they have a bathroom? They can choose what they want for breakfast or dinner. And I never imagined it would look like this. And it doesn't smell. And people actually say hello. And these are key things that people say all of the time. They come in and they'll say, wow, it's like, it's not what we expected. You say, what did you expect? And they say, well, you see all these things on the news about places falling apart and there's no care and it's all complaints and people don't get choices, and and they see images of derelict rooms, and all of this is portrayed constantly. So when they walk in and it's warm and people smile and say, hi, hello, would you like a drink? Welcome to Azalea Court or to wherever. It takes them by surprise, and they're often not ready for that. They're ready to come in and actually have a fight about what it is that they're expecting, and it actually takes them by surprise, and they're like, oh, okay, this isn't actually as bad as I thought it was going to be.
Welcome to social care. It's not as bad as you thought it was going to be. It's a
Yeah.
powerful strapline. But yeah, it's really sad that that's where the sector is at. It's that I absolutely echo that. We often get you don't see the good news stories in the media. You only see the incredibly frustrating and sad cases of abuse or hardship or poor care and inadequate CQC.
Michael, one of the things that has changed in that respect is when I first started in social care, if you were having an event, you could ring the local press and they would come and they would take pictures and they would take stories from people. Now, nobody's interested. You might be asked to write your own piece or send some pictures in, but because we lost the local newspapers, I mean, I can't remember the last time I had a local newspaper put through my door. And you even lost the papers that didn't cost very much, but they were kind of like borough papers. So there is that disconnection between us and the rest of the community, because all of those mediums have gone, and that's the downside to us moving towards a more technological age, that we've lost that physical feel of opening a paper and seeing a wonderful spread of what really has happened in that care home in that week.
So what do we need to do to change?
We as a sector needs to make more effort, which probably is a difficult pill to swallow, considering all of the things that we're faced with every day. But the only way that people will understand who we are and understand what our contribution has been over the last 60, 70 years and how we as a sector have underpinned the NHS for all of those years is if we as a sector make ourselves more visible.
Simple.
To be honest, it is very simple. The drawback to that is that a lot of the mediums that we would have used, as I was saying earlier, have been removed. So everything now is about TikTok, Instagram, your Facebook, which is quite outdated now apparently. We have things like carehome.co.uk, but none of them give you that real feeling for what we are.
I'm fascinated. I've been dying to ask this question from the start. Where do you think the sector is going? So in 40 years' time, where do you think the sector will be, and what do you think? Where do you hope? Well, where do you hope we'll be, and where do you think we'll be?
Where I hope we will be is we will be very much in people's hearts and thoughts as a first point of contact for any kind of care delivery. That we will feature very highly when people are talking about services that are delivered, that we will be considered to be one of those first response services and given the credit for what it is that we can offer and we can do. Where I think we will be is not in that place. I truly don't know how the next 40 years will pan out. I think that there, with a lot of investment coming from outside of the UK, it puts our sector in a slightly more precarious position because we are being led by another country's financial position because the investment doesn't have that personalisation around it. I think that the smaller providers will actually, if they dig deep and create a very intimate and personal approach to the sector, they will survive. I would like to think that the sector as a whole will reflect on itself and will stop looking at what others can do for us and look more at what we can do for ourselves to promote our independence. And I think that we should talk more about the fact that we were created by a need that the government wasn't fulfilling because they did not have the financials to actually go out and build with such scope that the private sector has stepped in and has achieved some remarkable results for social care. So I think that there needs to be more recognition from our governments that we responded as a sector to a need that they asked us to respond to, and they should support us more in enabling us to continue to support people that need care. And I've chosen my words quite carefully, but I think it's a very sensitive subject. But I have an inherent belief that we are a community of carers who have stuck at what we do because we truly believe that change is possible. And the last health and social care has been part of my life for 45 years. And it was part of my mother's life, and it was part of my aunt's life as well. So I have grown up in this environment of nursing and care. And I will do as much as I possibly can to continue to support the sector and support anybody that needs support, whether it's through talking to people or listening, because listening is just as important.
I'm mindful that so we're speaking in December of 25, and I'm mindful that Barchester and HD1 have just managed to conclude a very significant deal, where a foreign investor has come in and basically bought the businesses out. I think it's very difficult now for smaller providers to start up and to take that first step. Quite frankly, care homes cost an awful lot to own and to run. Very few people have that £2-3 million equity in a check that they need, even with debt. Do you think that represents a threat to the sector, that we don't have these smaller providers in the future? Or do you think there is always going to be a way for the smaller independent care homes to continue to run and work?
I think it's essential that we have the smaller providers, that we have choice. I think that the smaller providers have a huge voice, and they can provide a level of care and understanding that's not generic. I think with the larger providers, you can lose some of the knowledge and some of the contacts that you need to be able to continue to provide the right kind of care. You know, I'm not. There are some fantastic providers out there, and any provider is only as good as the people that are providing the care that is being delivered. But I have, over the years, I've been with Twinglobe now for 23 years. And prior to that, I worked for a number of large organisations. And when I talk to people today, there is that feeling of disconnection with the end user. And I think with the smaller providers, we can support the larger providers by having the knowledge of that connection and helping them not lose that connection. Does that make sense?
It makes sense to me. I think as a smaller provider who has delusions of grandeur and think you should think we were bigger than we are. I think it makes sense that it's. I think my concern is that the financial requirements of the large providers, third-party equity, private equity, VCs or REITs or whatever, plus all the debt, means that the business becomes a machine that is financialized, which is a horrible word, but its only purpose is to make money. In our business, we talk about running a care home business in that order of priority. Get the care right, get the property right, the business follows after that. And I think sometimes that gets lost in the larger corporate, maybe.
Yeah, and that's the disconnection. That's the issue with the investors asking for the returns and saying, what is your occupancy, what is your staff, what is your turnover, what is your agency, how many admissions have you had, how many discharges, how long was that bed empty for? And I think as a small provider, and it takes a lot of energy. I expend a huge amount of energy just coaxing and talking to people about what they can do to remain in contact with their homes. For example, I spoke to somebody the other day. We were talking about complex care, and I said, how do your managers feel about complex care, and how do they feel about the levels of care that they're actually getting coming through in respect of referrals? And I was told, I don't know. I've never asked. And I think that if we can ask those questions when we're in these groups, these meetings, forums, etc., it may just encourage the individual to go back and say, do you know what, I was at a meeting the other day and someone asked me this question, but you've never raised it with me. What are the problems? So it's just potentially about sowing some seeds, and maybe one in every few people would pick that seed up and ask that question, which then propels a conversation.
So is there anything that you think someone entering care, or the family members of it, would want to take from that in terms of questions to ask, or going back to the philosophy or approach of care?
Did you say families?
Yeah, anyone. This whole podcast is designed to be to anyone who is new to the sector, entering into it.
I would say anybody that's looking to come into the sector, whether you are somebody that's looking to purchase care, purchase a care facility, build a care facility, or work in a care facility, go and visit as many as you possibly can and talk to people. Talk to them about what their journeys have been, what they've experienced. Because do you know what? It's not all doom and gloom. It is sunshine. There's so much sunshine out there. And there are some great opportunities. And there are so many people that need care and support that I would do whatever I could to convince an investor to build a nice 50-bedded, 40-bedded care home and help them as much as possible to recruit and provide the right type of care for people. But knowledge is everything. Knowledge of the good, knowledge of the bad, knowledge of the indifferent, but knowledge is key.
Yeah. And do you think that I again throw it back at you, future concerns, that unless the sector is recognised as being pretty fundamental to the existence of the NHS, we're always going to be seen as, at best, gifted amateurs, and that the clinical knowledge that we have, which often surpasses that of some medical professionals, but also the care knowledge, how to care, how to look after that person, how to. Here's Sam. Sam doesn't eat particularly well at the dining room table. But we've noticed that Sam eats really well if you give them some finger food in a bowl and you put it on that radiator there. that level of knowledge and insight can be lost really easily. And care becomes automated. We end up with robots, whether we're talking about humans who have gone through a sort of a task-based approach or actual literal robot. And my concern is that we could end up with a sector like that. But do you ever feel that we could go down that route, or do you think that the nature of care is such that it's incredibly unlikely?
I think there's always a possibility. I what I've learned over the years is never rule out what the impossible. There's always the possibility that it could be driven in that way, but I would like to think not. I would like to think that there are enough people in our sector, and I speak to them, who genuinely want to see change and want to see a continuation of the services that we have now. But you are very, very right that we have to come out from the shadow of the NHS, because we existed before the NHS. We were here before them. We set the groundwork. The NHS came and built their medical arm. We have always been there, we have always supported, and we have been called upon repeatedly to step up to all of the challenges. And obviously the most recent one that we had was the COVID one. And we were repeatedly asked to step up, step up, step up. And the great thing about our sector is that when we are asked to step up, we do, and we do with such a huge effort. But sadly, when that crisis is over, people forget very quickly. And what we need to do is to keep reminding people that actually we were here first, and that we underpin what the NHS is. We're the roots that have made that massive, I use the terminology, that huge oak tree grow. But we are the roots that have spread out, and we have talked to all the other trees in all of the other country, the counties everywhere, and we have created that environment. And if you destroy us, then the trees will fall.
That's an incredibly inspiring note to end this on, Julie. That's wonderful. I really appreciate you. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's, if someone wanted to get in touch with you, how would they be able to do it? If they want to ask you questions or to follow up any of the points that
you can contact me on LinkedIn. You can contact me. I'm happy for anyone to have my email address. I will honestly talk to anybody about our sector and how fantastic our sector is. We offer people support with training. A lot of our training that we've developed here is now CPD. And I always say this: if you have got an individual that needs support in training, if you've got a crisis and somebody needs something, then please drop me a message. We will put them into a training, and I will not charge you a penny for it, because the long term is that we will have a better group of individuals ready to go out and deliver that care. So email me, LinkedIn.
What's the Zalia Court postcode if someone wants to come to an
It's
open day?
EN1 2QN, and you are welcome
EN1.
anytime. Our bistro is open 7 days a week from 10 until 6. You can come and have a panini, you can have tea, coffee, hot chocolate, mulled wine. You will not be turned away.
That is brilliant. Thank you very much. Julie, you're a star. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much. Bye for now.